All right, what's happening? I wrote an article recently for a website that ended up getting rejected because it was not specific enough to the title they wanted me to write, and I kept it unspecific on purpose. And the title was something like teen workout routine, workout routine for a teenager. Obviously that's a very general title anyway, and it would be pretty irresponsible to write a workout routine for a teenager without knowing the goals of the teenager, what sports they might play, health, so on and so forth. It's just, especially it's like a 500-word article, really short. It just shouldn't be done, period. But there's more to me keeping it general than that, and that is the trend nowadays, especially even more so than when I was a kid, which was only, when I was in high school, was only 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. So when I was in high school, it was starting to become popular to specialize in a sport, to only play one sport, maybe two. If you're a two-sport athlete, that was kind of rare. So much so that, especially for my baseball team, if you were a good baseball player and you wanted to play another sport, you had to deal with a very unhappy head coach. And that I didn't see that as anything too strange, other than, why wouldn't you want a guy to be good at two sports, making him more athletic for the one? But I didn't see it the way I do now. And the way I see it now is you get these kids, even before high school, who specialize and have picked one sport. And they've picked one sport, and they've hired special coaches, whether it's exactly specific to that sport. So let's just use baseball, because the instances of specifying in baseball result in some really bad circumstances compared to some other sports. So using baseball, let's say you have a hitting coach, you have a strength coach, and the parent undoubtedly wants a baseball savvy strength coach. And then maybe you even have a throwing coach. Maybe if you're a catcher, you have a catcher's coach. You obviously have baseball practice with the team, and in most programs, you're going to throw a baseball every single day. You'll swing a bat most days, probably every single day. You'll play baseball in some way or fashion. You break it down, of course, into its parts, but you're playing baseball every single day of the week. And when you have a kid that's doing that, not only is that alone, just right there, bam, you take a sport like baseball, ton of stress on the throwing shoulder, okay? Especially with kids who are not probably being taught the best way to throw a baseball. Most coaches, especially at that level, aren't the best coaches. If they were that good of a coach, unless they had this ethical obligation, or they just love coaching high school kids, they're probably going to be up at a level, college or more advanced. So you get coaches that aren't coaching the best way to throw mechanically, anatomically, structurally, and they're throwing every single day on the same shoulder. They're also swinging one direction. So if you're a righty, you're always rotating left, and vice versa. If you're a lefty, you're always rotating right. When you're throwing, you're also rotating the same direction. So if I'm a righty, I'm twisting towards my left while I swing. I'm twisting towards my left while I throw a ball. Everything is one directional. Okay? So day after day after day after day after day, my body is working it's more complicated than just one side or the other, but it's working in one direction. It's working rotating left. My right leg is driving towards forward and left. My left leg is planting and letting this kind of pivot, almost this stop and rotation happen so that we can create a whip. There's this constant, my right shoulder is experiencing drastic, violent ranges of motions and strong whip, and the left is not experiencing any of that. And even, seems weird, but when you're up to bat, you're always looking one direction. So you got the neck is turned one way, and then when you throw, you're turned one way. So I got my head this way, everything's left if I'm a righty, and then I'm twisting towards the left, and I'm a lefty at the exact opposite. That alone is creating all these structural imbalances from one side to the other that in real life, which isn't a baseball game, those imbalances will lead to problems because one side is built to do one thing, and of course it's more complex than this, but just keeping it simple. One side is built to do one thing, and the other is built to do another thing. And if you switch that without any training, or you force both to do the same thing at the same time that the other side is doing, you're putting the body through stresses it's not used to doing. And if you don't gradually get into that, something is going to give. One side is going to give. Either the side that's carrying the load the other side can't handle because it's doing more than it can handle, or the weaker side in this movement is going to fail and structurally break down because of that being weaker. So the sport itself is creating all these imbalances, especially with baseball. These shoulders, the shoulder for a healthy adult or a healthy human being is a very tender joint. It has to be strengthened, it has to be wound tight, it has to be really taken care of and focused on, and it can't be destroyed. And when you play baseball, there is, unless you have a great coach, which is very rare that a coach would cover this, there is little to no attention paid to the structural integrity of the shoulder. Maybe you do some band work warming up at practice, maybe you have some banded drills, but there's just nothing close to the right amount. Coaches tell you not to lift certain ways that would actually structurally solidify the shoulder, especially the rear part of the shoulder. There's all sorts of things. So the sport itself is creating weaknesses. And any time you do one thing over and over and over, everything you don't do is now a weakness by definition, because you get good at what you do and you don't get good at what you don't do. So it's a weakness compared to what you're good at. So if you do one sport, that sport is your strength. Everything else is a weakness. And you're asking a teenager or younger to decide at that age that the rest of their life is not as important, or they won't make a decision later in life that's different than what they're doing right now. So it's the same way you wouldn't ask a 12-year-old to decide what career they will be in for the remainder of their life. You shouldn't ask that age person to decide on one sport and one activity for the same reason. They're going to likely have a change of heart down the road. You're risking just unbelievable amounts of stress because this kid is just driving home 1 point, and if he or she doesn't succeed, that's really hard to deal with unless you are emotionally and intellectually, psychologically built to withstand failure and then the drive through it and all the things you learn as you grow, as you mature. So physically, lots of imbalances. Performance-wise, creating tons of weaknesses. And if you played multiple sports in different realms and modalities, baseball, there's no aerobic component, so maybe you play basketball or maybe you play soccer, and what you gain from soccer is this foot awareness, this awareness of yourself in regards to your feet, being able to use both sides of your body equally as far as feet are concerned. Vision on a field, being able to control a ball and see your teammates. If you're using basketball, same idea. Using both hands equally. You have to be able to use your left as good as your right. Change directions, see your teammates, see the opponents, and control the ball at the same time. Depth perception, shooting a ball through. There's all these things you gain from other sports that can also build the primary sport you want to play, baseball in this circumstance. So when you don't play other sports, you don't have that ability. You will not gain that outside influence that will improve the overall athlete in the game of baseball. So you better hope that what you're doing for baseball specifically is perfect, which almost by definition, if you're only doing baseball, you have no general physical preparation. You have no general skills to build this specificity on. So you will not have as high of a peak of specificity that you could with this just general athlete. I mean, think when you're a kid, that one kid in the neighborhood or wherever you are in school that can do everything. You pick up any ball and he or she kills it. You get on a board and you surf, skateboard, snowboard, they can do it all. They do all these, they climb on jungle gyms, they do flips, they do all these weird things that kids are like, whoa, what is that? And they almost always become the better athlete. They make it to college athletics, they might even make it to pro athletics, and that general skill set is a huge part of that. So why not create a specific training routine? Because you leave yourself open to weaknesses. Now, there are certain movements that carry over to a wide degree and a wide variety of other things. You know, the squat, the deadlift, various presses, the Olympic style lifts. You know, obviously technique is huge and all that, but there are some core movements that will carry over to a lot of other movements. Gymnastics, any body weight movement to practicing a high degree of it, getting really good at these things, there will be carryover. But just because you play on land doesn't mean you shouldn't be a good swimmer. Just because you never ride a bike for your sports doesn't mean you shouldn't do cycling sprints on a bicycle. You always run on flat ground for your sport, do hill sprints, sand dunes, stairs. I mean, as many things as you can think of, and then just get the timing similar to your sport. So if you do, a baseball, there's no aerobic component. So if you labor aerobically for these long duration aerobic bouts, you're probably going to take away from your 1 rep power output, which is a swing, a throw, things like that. There's very no aerobic component to baseball. So you want to be all-inclusive and vast in your training mechanisms, but also consider, okay, if baseball is the main sport, we want to build power, explosiveness, things like that. So you tailor this wide variety of movements towards that. So your bicycle rides are intense, hills, fast. Even trick biking, jumping, things like that. Your running sprints, your swimming, they're all hard, powerful. And then you vary that. Different sports, soccer, a lot more aerobic capacity. Sprints are always going to build aerobic capacity better than aerobic capacity will build anaerobic capacity. So err on the side of short and intense. I'm trying to talk fast because I'm running out of time. So you want to do as many things as possible, and then think about the timing of the sport. You also want to do things that aren't timing of the sport because you never know what might happen. In baseball, you might have a tournament where you play 2 or 3 games in a day, and you need some of that just long-term duration endurance where you can just handle working all day long. So that might be a long hike, an all-day hike, just to get your body prepared to not rest after 2 hours or 3 hours. It's throw another fork in the road and deal with it. So that's why I don't like a very specific routine for a young kid. I like gymnastics, power lift movements, Olympic lift movements, and everything else you might think of that's weird and crazy, and try to get pretty good at it and see how it carries over to the sport you choose to play. Besides the structural integrity of only doing one sport, you also have the psychological, the stress, the constant repetition with no variation. Now, you might have a kid that absolutely loves that one sport and doesn't want to do anything else, and if that's what they really, really love, awesome, then let them do that. But most kids want some variety in some way or fashion. The other thing is when you have kids sitting in a classroom all day in a closed hip position, they're usually not abs turned on, supporting good posture, shoulders scapulas turned on, all these things. They're not sitting in a good position. You have them sitting all day in a classroom, they're not doing anything, and then you put them in this stressful sport scenario, and you're taking a poorly supported structure and you're adding stress to it. So you got schools sitting in desks, and then you're just constant repetition of the same movements in sports. I think youth training should be drastically varied, as many things as possible, and then tailor the timing towards what you want to do for your given sports or activities. Okay, I ran out of time. Talk to you soon. Later.